Good morning, you're watching Hornbill TV. Today we are going to take you on a discussion of a very big topic, a big issue that has been concerning all the Nagas within the state. With the conclusion of successful urban local bodies election in Nagaland on June 26th, after a gap of 20 years with 33% reservation for women, it is noteworthy that the Naga society has kept aside patriarchy, which we all would know was a catalyst in the public uproar that occurred a few years ago. But however, right now, a new task seems to be at hand with the inclusion of non-indigenous government nominees in the urban local bodies, which is being strongly opposed by various associations and social bodies. As we all know that the NSF deplored the candidature of non-Nagas, presenting their concern to the Chief Minister of Nagaland, Rio, stating that ULB serves as a pivotal role in local governance. It is a matter to be pondered upon on why and how to tackle such a situation at hand. Whether true justification of a developing society lies in inclusion and acceptance, leaving behind old norms, or whether non-inclusion is truly justified. Hornbill TV today will shed some light onto this matter with our expert opinion from our senior journalist, Mr. Al Nguli, who will be joining us from the newsroom. Hello.
Yes, hello.
Good morning, Sir Al.
Good morning, Lee.
So, would you be kind enough to highlight this current matter at hand and how and why such a rule is even being introduced for the inclusion of non-Naga representative in our local bodies?
Yeah, the controversy over having village elders and representatives for Naga communities is not new in Nagaland, Lee. If you have read back, you will see that the British administration had introduced the Gaunbura system, what is called the village elder. It was a system that was introduced by the British administration way back in the 1880s. So during this time, it was felt that the eldest person of a certain community would be the representative of the government in all matters that is associated with the citizenry or the villages or the town. But during those times, we were not a state as we used to. It was a contiguous area that had hundreds of villages, each of them independent from each other, and they had their own distinct and unique cultural traditions and customs and laws. So it was during such time that the British came. When they came, they introduced the idea of institutionalized representation in the villages, which we now see as Gaunbura. And now over those times, we did not have other people living among us, in that sense that it was not as much as that we see today. So mostly the Gaunbura system in the hills was basically representatives of the villagers, Naga villagers. Now today when we talk about the urban local body elections, now this controversy was something that was always simmering underneath. It was always there. But I think this is the very first time that we are, I know it because even when we were in school and colleges, we were also part of what you call the town council elections. During those times, it was called town council committee elections. So I know it. And even during those times, the idea of having a non-Naga municipal or councillor was an entirely foreign idea to us. And it was difficult for us to wrap our minds around it. But it was always there. It is just that nobody had spoken up before. And now when the Lotha Students' Union issued a press statement prior to the urban local body elections, saying a certain so-and-so woman who is contesting in Wokam is married to a so-and-so non-Naga. So that person should not be given a space in the decision-making body. So that was where it started vocally. But this issue had always been there from decades before. So now to the question why we need to have this non-Naga representative in the urban local institutions, right? That's what you're asking, non-NAGA representatives, and why should we have this?
Yes, sir, exactly, sir.
So I'll answer that question. The reason is that, say, whether we like it or not, whether there are laws for or against it or not, the truth is that today the Naga people are not alone in the state. There are different communities, whether we like it or not, and at a certain point of time, if it were not then, if it is not now, it will be even in the future, where there will be a need for a representation to represent the welfare of this particular community. It could be the Muslims, it could be the Korka and the Nepali, it could be the Kachari, Garo. And I think this is a very natural progression of why they want a representation in the government, at least in the municipal establishment levels. So I believe it was out of a need, not out of an indigenous affront to our community pride, and in order to promote that, I do not believe it was that. So like I said, there are still a welfare people, even foreigners, there are still a welfare people who may or may not be guests for Nagaland, but they still constitute a large part of the population. That is why the idea of a nomination, I believe, was floated.
Okay. So actually, yes, you have very well addressed my first question as how and why was this introduced. But now, I want to ask you, as you have already mentioned that there are minorities even within our own state. There are so many minorities. So now the next question that I want to put forward to you is like, what are the pros and cons of having these non-Nagas in the local bodies? What new will they bring to the governance, and what, just in case we want to speak about the cons of having them in the governance, what are the cons, and why are the student bodies and the other social bodies, why are they going against it? Because are they just keeping the cons inside, or are they not looking at the pros of having them in the governance?
That is a question that is purely hypothetical in nature, and also will demand an answer that will be purely hypothetically. But I would like to say this. I think for us to have a definition of what a pro and a con about a community, especially within the framework of a political people and their institutions, and how to govern them, I think the definition of pro and cons here does not sit well with me. Because first thing, it is difficult. First thing, there are 14 major recognized tribes in Nagaland. So this community, 14 or 17, is it 14 or 17?
16, sir.
I think it's 16, okay, yeah, 16. So there are a lot of communities in Nagaland, and some of them form some of the biggest populations in Nagaland. But I'm telling you, if you compare it to the other tribes, you can see there is a disparity in their contribution to the state, or in their performance in the educational sector, or in the number of government administrative services that they represent their community, or even economically too. So there are a lot of disparities. So if large population and tribes in Nagaland can still suffer disparities and have questions about their welfare directions, then I think it will be extremely obvious for us to say that the minorities will be suffering even more. So that is the first reason why I would not like to address what is pro and cons in this regard. But all I can say is, like I said before, whether we like it or not, they're still a part of us. And as long as they are in the state, someone will have to represent their welfare. Someone will have to represent their voice. Because first thing, I think, so far, if you go deep into the districts, we don't have certain communities representing certain communities. For example, you will not have an AUG GP where there is a village that is entirely of Lotha.
Yes, sir.
So only you as a Chang will be able to represent your community's story. You know the history, the subconscious narrative of your own history. You know it, you know your language. You're able to communicate psychologically with your own Chang people. So that is one thing. So when we talk about community representation here, I think the first thing that the government thought that a nominee would be appropriate would be is that you cannot send a Sumi to represent the Kacharis. You cannot send a Lotha to represent the Aus. So I think this is not just something that demands a political decision, but it also represents an understanding of the economic conditions, the welfare imperatives of the citizens they want to represent. So in this case, the Gorkha and the Kachari and the Garo and the Nepali, for instance, you need someone who represents them. So that is why, because there was no seat that was allocated to them, or there was protest and there was opposition by certain community groups, including students, in regard to having non-Naga representatives in the urban local body elections, because there was nothing that was allocated to them. I feel that the government is trying to give them a voice by giving them a nominated, not an elected, but a nominated representative from among them, so that their welfare imperatives would be represented at a policy decision-making level.
So actually, the thing is, like when we talk about such issues, such all the social and political turmoil within the state, there are so many matters of concern, and one we have recently come across was the assassination of the Gambura of New Market in Zimbabwe. And even on this issue, on this particular issue that we are talking about, even here the DNSU has also opposed the government's decision on the nomination of non-Nagas. However, in Dimapur, when we had a Gambura who was a non-Naga, but there was no voice raised about that, that matter. And even as of now, there's a demand of ILP and all this and that. There, as I said, there's a lot of turmoil, a social political turmoil. So when all these things are in plain sight, why cry over spilled milk? That is my big question.
I think it's a good point, because yes, it is true that even before the urban local body elections were conducted, non-Naga representatives, GBs, were already there, and nobody said anything about it. But I think here, with in this context, I think the tone of conversation changes here, because here we're not talking about what was. I think here we are talking about what will be.
Yes.
So that is first. So even if there was no outcry prior to the elections about why we had non-Naga GBs in first place, looking at the direction the conversation is going, I think there are community organizations who believe that the cultural identity of the people will be compromised if this continues. So the urban local body elections actually gave the space, offered them the space to raise this point of conversation. And that is what exactly the elections did. So like I said, it's not so much about what was, it's so much about what will be in the future. And I believe the students' unions and some of the social organizations are trying to project this insecurity about our cultural capital and how it might be affected even in the future. And in regard to the killing of the New Market GP, I think it is an entirely different issue, because like I said, there are also other GPs who are not just from the Muslim communities. There are also the Garos, I believe they have. And if you look at the history of the notice, Nagaland is not the only one state that has GBs league. Assam has GBs, Ganburas, and Arunachal Pradesh, they have. So it was purely not a representative administration, but it was more like a link, a liaison with the government and the citizenry that is represented by the GB.
So actually, as you mentioned here right now that even Assam has GBs, I will not pinpoint, but however, it is true that in Assam there are some non-Assamese GBs as well, like from different states, and I don't think.
Right.
Yes, I don't think they go about agitating, protesting against it. But in this particular case in Nagaland, whenever we come across such a situation, everyone has this weapon that we call the Article 371A. And now, how do we implement Article 371A, which has been mentioned in almost all the letters that have been submitted to the Chief Minister and the press releases of all the social bodies? Everyone is using 371A as a weapon to fight against this nomination. So how do we justify that? How does 371A protect us against the inclusion of non-Nagas in our local bodies?
Yeah, I think these ethno-political crises that keep happening within indigenous societies across the world, especially in Asia, is not something that was born out of some egalitarian objectives. It was more to do with protecting the identity of certain regions or your community or your certain group of indigenous alliances. It was something that was like vehemently protected against. And during those times, the idea, for instance, the idea of a Naga marrying a non-Naga person was not only looked down on, it was discouraged. It was spat upon and cursed. So when we talk about representation and when we talk of Article 371, yes, Nagaland has already received this wonderful tool called Article 371. And this is a wonderful tool for us to protect our cultural, social, and linguistic capital. We need to. Yes. But it is also true, just as you said, that we don't use it as a tool all the time. We use it as a weapon to further our interests, often at the cost of other, let's say, communities or other interests. So when we talk about, leaving behind people, but who are still part of our community and state here, I think, I would say that we often misinterpret Article 371 just to further our interests only without considering that much of the dynamics involved in administrating a group of people who are not really Nagas. Or whether we like it or not, like I said, they're still part of us. And I'm not saying making this statement alluding that we should give them representatives or we should elect a representative from them lead. I'm just saying they're part of us. Even if they are guests, they are still part of us, and someone will have to talk about their hunger. Someone will have to talk about their water bills. Someone will have to talk about their power and jobs and unemployment among them. Someone eventually will have to talk about them. So if that need arises, there will have to be a representative who can stand not as a leader chosen by the leaders themselves, but as a leader recognized constitutionally, who can stand before the government and present their grievances. Eventually someone will have to come up. And I think, let's say even the Bible in the ancient times, God directed the Israeli people, Israelites, to not suppress the foreigners. They are not to suppress them. They are to treat them with dignity. Yes. So I think here, like I said, it is not so much about representing the community alone as part of the community's voice. We also need, they also need someone who is constitutionally recognized, and that is as a nominated member of the municipal election organization, to stand before the government when their welfare concerns or developmental concerns are raised before the state.
Sure, sir. So thank you, and thank you for your expertise on this topic. And yes, there's a lot more to discuss, but however, we are running out of time right now. And thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
As it goes without saying that though we may have a lot of reasoning at hand, but in the very end, it all depends on the public. on the general people, all of you that are watching, because the government is always of the people, by the people and for the people. Thank you for tuning in. Keep watching Hornbill TV.